Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's interview. This is the sixth, if I'm not mistaken, interview in our series for the general election 2024. Tonight, I am joined by a female candidate, the first female candidate that I would be interviewing. She is Angela Feeney, Councillor Angela Feeney, currently serving in the Maynooth Municipal District. Now, I know Angela a little bit, but really not as much as I would know the Salvage and Leixlip councillors. But what I have picked up from Angela is that she is a powerful person, but a modest person. And I don't think she's going to do her own CV any justice. I went looking to get a little bio on her today, and I'm going to hit the highlights because I have a feeling she won't rattle them off on her own behalf. Angela Feeney is the former head of school in Technological University Dublin. She completed a PhD, so it's Dr. Angela Feeney, if you don't mind, on student retention in higher education, with a particular focus on students entering from socio-economically disadvantaged backgrounds. She was awarded Chevalier Le Palme Académique by the French government. That's not a small award, by the way, guys. I looked it up, for promotion of links between France and Ireland and the French language. She was awarded the President's Scholarship to Maynooth University. She is bilingual, having been a former lecturer in French and translation. She was the elected staff representative on the governing body and academic council of TU Dublin. She's also a mum, a neighbour, and a councillor. And so I am absolutely delighted to introduce you to, for anybody who doesn't know, Councillor Angela Feely. Thanks a million for joining us. You can say hello if you're there, if you're still with me.
Thanks, Tressa, and thanks very much for organising this. And lovely to be here this evening. Really delighted to chat to you this evening.
Brilliant. Well, I'm thrilled to have you. I'm thrilled to have you because this is certainly the first interview that we've done of this format, where you're obviously you're running and you're running on a campaign. Will you introduce yourself to people and tell everybody a little bit about yourself? I've hit all the hard stuff, but who is
Yeah,
Angela Feeney? I'll give the mic to you.
yeah, yeah. I'm all those things that you mentioned. Look at most importantly, I'm born and raised in Maynooth, generations back on my mother's side. We grew up in, my mother was born in Doctors Lane in Maynooth, and then we moved to the first council estate that was built in 1932 in Maynooth in Old Greenfield. And that's where we moved to. And my mother was widowed very young at 47 with five of us to bring up. So we were very glad when, I suppose that's probably something to come back to later on, but this very nice, kind person knocked at the door one day and asked my mother, because my father died quite suddenly, asked my mother, did she need any help? And it worked out that was Emmett Stagg, and it wasn't an election time. And I
Hmm.
remember thinking, I didn't know anything about politicians, I didn't even know the word, but I remember thinking, that's a kind person. He came and asked her about helping with forms for the widow's pension and for probate and all that. And yeah, so my mother, I suppose, had to go back to work, because economically on a widow's pension, it wasn't a lot. And I was probably the third sibling then who had a chance to go to college. The older siblings had to go out to work. Economically, that was the way things were at the time. So I felt, very lucky to have got the President's Scholarship to go to college to get a good education. And I suppose when I got married myself, I became a teacher and I had my own three kids. I suppose all the way through the education system, I always felt that if there was a wrong, that I'd always have to point it out. The first school that I started in, I was told by the principal that only the girls studied French, the boys didn't study French, and the girls only studied it to what was then the intercert. And I suppose I remember thinking straight away, I was only 22 years of age, thinking there's something wrong about this. Because you might remember, Trasa, to get into college in those days, you had to have a modern language to
Mhm.
matriculate.
That's
And
right.
I felt not only was it about the French, which obviously is a beautiful language, but I also felt that this principal was making the decision that those kids would not go to college. So if they didn't do it to the Leaving Cert.
Mm.
So I set about setting a French exchange up. And I thought the students all loved that. And they all came knocking on the principal's door and saying, we want to do French. And by the time I'd left there 9 years later to move on to third level, all of the kids, boys and girls, studied French to Leaving Cert and went on themselves to do third level. And it's lovely to see some of them endorsing me now for the general election as well. So
Wow.
that's my political journey started there, I suppose. And then, we had three kids and there was no playground in Maynooth. So we set up a playground committee and we got the playground. So we lobbied and advocated for the first playground that Maynooth had, which is there today. So that's kind of my journey into politics. And I was
Wow.
reluctant. go into politics, but I was usually the person behind somebody like an Emmett Stagg or John McGinley canvassing and supporting them. So I've been a member for a lot of years and very active, but I thought, no, politics isn't for me. And then I thought, well, I can't have two daughters and tell them to put themselves forward for things in life if I don't push myself again. So when they asked me the third time, I said, you know what, I'd give it a go. And I was elected on the first round in 2019 and I was re-elected in 2024. What's surprising to me, Tressa, is that I'm still the only woman out of 10 councillors in
Yeah.
this area, and the only woman out of 10 councillors the last term as well. So that's kind of crazy to me, and it's not representative and it's not good. But I'm happy to be there and flying the flag for women, but I think we need more.
We absolutely do need more. I love hearing the stories when women start to kind of emerge and step into their power a little bit. I'm obviously a big fan of it, and I suppose going into politics is something I myself have considered over the years, and I have a deep appreciation for any woman who does it. So let me put that out there on the table straight away. Mormon all the way. I suppose Labour have quite a history in North Kildare, going back to William Norton. He was the leader of Labour way back in 1932. Google reliably informed me today. But what I didn't know was that in the local elections of 1942, while he was still a leader, Kildare actually became, you probably know this, the first county in which the Labour Party won an overall majority in the
That's
local
right.
authority. I just found that interesting. And of course, no history of Labour in Kildare would be complete without mentioning Emmett Stagg. May he rest in peace. He passed away
Yes.
in March 2024, but he
Yes.
served from 1987 to 2006. So there is a stronghold of Labour support in Kildare and in North Kildare. And I know that Emmett, it's funny, the anecdote you told me there about your mum,
Mhm.
it makes sense because Emmett focused on social issues quite a lot and economic issues, but the crossover between the two, and was a very gentle person by all accounts. So you're very welcome. I'd say anybody who's watching, our audience is ticking up. The feed and the audio all look good. I've got my two screens here, and I always do a
Yeah.
little bit of a checkpoint in. It's all good. So we'll get into some questions, Angela.
Yes.
I've had a look at what your priorities are in terms of your campaign. I would like to talk about the Three Schools project in Celbridge. I wouldn't
Mhm.
expect anybody who's been covering a different municipal district to be an expert in anything like that. But I have I have a big problem when 9 million is spent on phone pouches, while for 20 years, probably, well, 800, it could even be higher, pupils in schools are
Yeah.
without the campus that they have been waiting on for 20 years. And one of those schools is St. Raphael's. I just don't understand the delay. Now, you're in the opposition, and
Yeah.
I'm a healthy cynic. I have respect for everybody, but I have my problems with the status quo on certain things. What can be done
Mhm.
to get in there and solve problems like that? Just talk to me about your view on the three schools
Uh,
issue.
I feel so strongly about this, as you know, because I've worked in education all my life and I've served on boards of management. I've managed programs, and big part of managing any program or any group of students or staff is planning. And I cannot for the life of me understand if every child that's born into this state is given a PPSN number, they exist in the eyes of the state. And surely the educational journey of that child should be planned. And I think the problem we've all seen in North Kildare is this huge, we've 250,000 now living in Kildare, like huge numbers, huge explosion of population. And yet the planning alongside that has been appalling. And as a result, I'm flooded with emails every day of the week by stressed parents,
Mhm.
stressed families, scrambling for school places. What should be, to me, Tressa, one of the most enjoyable journeys into second level for a student or into primary school is now tainted and really horribly stressed by parents and children, because parents are trying to protect the child and not let on that they're stressed. The child can sense that there's tension there. They can't even look forward because they don't know which school they're going to be in. I feel very strongly about this because of the fact that it's an educational journey that's now, and particularly for special needs education. If we think that I'm on the doorsteps, and I'm not only having to be on the doorsteps, I've heard this for years now. Parents who have children with additional needs have to fight at every stage along the way. And if they're lucky enough to get something in the primary system, then they have to fight all over again for the second level system. Surely that care should follow that child because that child still exists in the education system. Now, what can be done? I, as a head of department in DIT, TU Dublin, we know that the department works at a glacial space. That needs to be resolved. That needs to be resolved. Something sits on a shelf for years and years. And we're in catch-up mode now as a result of that. And that's wrong. People in North Kildare now are actually wondering what's going to happen. I was at a door today and somebody said there's one sibling in one particular school and the next sibling is not going to be in that school. And I tell you, Trasa, this woman in this case who lives in Maynooth said to me today, and I met another lady in Celebrate yesterday, the same boat. She said we couldn't get childcare in our own town.
Mhm.
So we had to go to Lucan to get childcare. So the child had to go to primary school in Lucan because the mother, the grandmother, was willing to step into that gap for childcare.
And do the commute.
Now, yes, and the commute, and to stop the commute. Now the child can't get into a school in Maynooth. Now, and has a sibling, an older sibling already in the school. I mean, so it's separating families. It's causing huge stress. And I hear principals as well saying that this is just not something that they enjoy having to tell parents. It's just horrific. And to think that I've been saying that we're now becoming the country of waiting lists for everything and waiting lists for school place we never thought we'd see.
Mhm.
And I'm saying to people, one woman this evening, what number are you at? I'm number 120 in one school. I'm number 25. You become a number in a
Yeah,
waiting list.
yeah.
And I just feel very strongly about it. I feel, and part of the reason I'm running Trust is that I feel that somebody has not been at that table, banging the table, saying, we're up here for population growth, second after Dublin, and you were bottom of the league for central funding, that for everything from schools, primary care centres, you name it. If we continue to sustain that, it's not possible. You wouldn't put an extension on your own house without the funds to do it. If the funds aren't coming from central government to do all those things like build those schools, primary care centres, now people will put the blame on the county council. We're going through an LAP process and the council actually does identify lands for schools. But the department has a huge role to that. The county council can only zone the land and say to the department, we have sites for schools here, primary care, primary centre, schools, secondary schools. But it's up to the department then to push the project along. It's not up to the council. And people need to be aware of that because people say, why doesn't the council put in more schools if they're putting in more houses? The council has already zoned lands, and that's where the dialogue between the Department of Education and the councils happens. But it's up to the department to drive the project. And it's not moving at the pace at which our population is growing.
Do
We're in
you,
this situation now.
is it literally sitting on a shelf, or is it just mired in bureaucracy and, processes that were designed when population was a different animal altogether? I mean,
There's,
I'm really confused with this because I don't believe that any politician, no matter what part of the spectrum of politics they come from, goes into the job looking to delay things. I would trust that people's motivations are in the right place, especially at their first shot in at the doll. And I'm, and
yeah,
I'm not a fan of normophobia. I don't mind saying it, but you'd give someone the benefit of the doubt early on, and you'd feel they're not doing it intentionally. But what can any new TD do if somebody with the right intentions goes in and
yes,
they can't get it sorted? How exactly are we going to shake these deliverables out
yeah,
of the government? Because it just seems to be an intractable problem. And
yeah.
another thing that strikes me is that all of the candidates now, and I've done a few interviews this week, what's being promised rightly, but what's being promised are things that we're catching up on.
We're
But
catching
we're
up.
like it's things that should have been done already. So
Yeah.
it frustrates me. We do need somebody to go in there with teeth, and I'm asking you if you're prepared for that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And just to say, Trasa, I call this out as well. Here's the thing. When we get these housing, big, huge, it used to be the SHDs, they're now called large housing developments. When
Mhm.
they come in front of us as councillors, just for obviously notification at this stage, I noted that if you take a big housing development, say in Clane, they did the audit of feeder schools to justify why that housing development would be permitted. And they had to look at and do an audit on feeder schools for those new people, new families coming in. They were citing Clongowes Wood as a feeder school. Now I called that out. I said, in other words, if Johnny, because it wouldn't be Mary, because it's a single sex school, if Johnny can't get in to Scoil Fórig in in Clane, so he can pack his bags and just trot up the road and knock on the door, and Clongo's happy days.
Actually, they
So
just let
that
him
had
in.
to be called out. Yeah, so like it can't be put in as a feeder school when the reality is that every parent moving into that new housing development couldn't even dream of sending their son or daughter to the highest fee paying school. So that had to be called. I called it out at meetings and said that cannot be realistically put in. So there are things we can do at a council level, but you're back to your question, what can we do if you're a TD? I do believe, even if you relate it to the delivery of housing, there is a layer and layer and layer of bureaucracy that's unnecessary in my view. There are stages that are necessary, don't get me wrong. We need to make sure that there's a quality and a rigorous process. But I maintain that there are layers that could be streamlined. If you think about it during COVID, Tressa, we were able to, if we're in a real crisis with regard to school delivery, a real crisis with regard to building houses as well as schools, we could streamline things then and fast track them. And I genuinely believe we're coming to that point now where we have to start saying, surely that 6 stage process can now be streamlined and fast tracked into a 2 stage and still be of a quality. Because I know procurement is necessary in the public service, but in some ways it's become very unwieldy. And it actually has delayed thing unnecessarily. And I think that's something that could be addressed straight away if we had somebody at the table saying, look, come on, get on with this.
Well, this is the thing. Your familiarity with those layers could be brought to bear on something like that.
Yeah.
And certainly if it's a case where we can call it the emergency that it is. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a place of your own to share with, let's say you want to start a family, to share with a
Yes.
partner, if you're lucky enough to get on the ladder in the first place, whether you're renting or
Yes.
buying, then you need to be lucky enough to have a GP who's going to look after you in pregnancy if you do decide to start a family. When you're pregnant, and I've been there, you are terrified of the lack of childcare and what's going to happen to your career. But if you bring a child up safely enough and healthy and well and able to start school, then you're terrified you're going to get a place or not for the school. Parents are in
Exactly.
a situation where they're terrified they won't get an SNA or additional support, or they'll be,
Yeah.
as I was recently,
Yeah.
rejected from CAMS on behalf of the child. And you spend their entire childhood fretting about the availability of services that should be a right to any child. Pediatric dentistry. I mean, I could literally go on, and I'm hearing it
Yes.
out left, right, and
Yes.
centre from parents as
Yes.
well. I want to move to a couple of comments that have come in,
Yes.
Angela, as we're speaking. I'm going to scroll up to the top. S. Nifionagon says, how will you childproof the policies for children? What do you see as the primary? I'll read them all, and we can
Yes.
take
Yes.
them. What do you see as the primary needs facing children?
Yeah.
Rupert's in, Councillor Rupert Heller,
Yes.
we all know well,
Yeah.
very popular councillor in Celbridge. He says, Angela was a huge, this is lovely, Angela was a huge support to me when I
Yeah.
ran in the local elections. She is a brilliant councillor, a hard worker, and truly understands the needs of people in North Kildare.
Oh, thank you, Rupert. Thank you.
Thanks,
That's
councillor.
that's
That's
yeah.
lovely.
Thank you.
I know that sentiment is shared.
Yeah.
Actually, there are many more people who've spoken so highly of you as well.
Thank
Um,
you.
Another question comes in. What change do you want to make so that our children are not paying for more legacy and catch up in 10 years' time? Well, here to that.
Yes.
Catherine says, Catherine Temple, I don't think the council is without blame. If we have no facilities, then they should block the housing estates and let it be known to government that housing won't be built until the infrastructure catches up with the population already there. And
Yes.
that comment coincides with our interview tonight. And it
Yes.
also coincides with the approval of yet more houses, and I don't think it hasn't hit the social media
Yes.
anyway in Celbridge, but there's more
Yes.
houses going in
Yes.
Ballyulster. There's a site been approved just today. What are they doing? It's like they just ram houses in, and
Yes.
everybody just gets squeezed tighter and tighter and tighter,
Absolutely.
choked in traffic.
Absolutely. I was at a door in Salvage the other day, and the lady who opened the door said to me, Angela, I'm seriously thinking of moving out of here because she said it takes me 40 minutes to get from here to the other side to get to. She wants to actually, she works with the HSE. She
Yeah.
actually wants to get the train into work, and it takes her 40 minutes. She said, I'm actually seriously thinking of moving out of here because it has just become gridlock out there and it's become depressing, she said. And she works from home where possible because she wants to avoid that. She said, the thought of heading out. Now, that has been, again, huge. Like we've chronic congestion in Celbridge and all the towns in North Kildare. Because why? We've had that huge development of population without the pre-planning, without putting in the infrastructure first, which would seem to make great logical sense, and then put in the housing. I mean, we need to, I said at one point when I joined the council first, we need to put a halt and take a breath and catch up with the infrastructure before we go the next phase of development.
Mm.
But it seems to have fallen on deaf ears. I know we've a housing crisis, absolutely, but we also need to remember, and I know people in your comments said there that the council isn't without blame. Of course not. But we must remember, and I sit on the finance committee, Tressa, for the last 6 years. And for the last 6 years within my witnessing, the director of finance for KCC, because it has to go in front of us as members of the finance committee, sends the same letter every year to the departments, the relevant departments of finance and local government, citing the up-to-date statistics. It's a great letter. It has the up-to-date house numbers, stats from the CSO, citing why Kildare should get more funding. And for the last 6 years that I've been on the committee, that letter has fallen on deaf ears. It's come back with no change, no change. Now, how can that happen that we have, my 6 years on the council, we've had continuous growth and the same pot of money has been handed to Kildare County Council. How Kildare County Council deals with that pot of money is another question, but the substantial issue to me is why hasn't that pot of money increased when we've been asked to take the overspill from Metropolitan Dublin, which we've taken gladly, but no extra funding, to actually deal with that and give
Let
them a
me
quality life.
Absolutely. Let me put something your way, Angela. And I'm on fuzzy ground because I'm trying to recall a document that came at me during a very busy time. But for the Speaker podcast, I did an FOI to Kildare County Council recently, asking them for evidence of their challenging the resource allocation. And
Yeah.
what came back was that standard answer: record not available or cannot be found. And
Well,
I
that's
thought, I thought, I thought to myself, sorry, what?
yeah,
I
that's
mean,
interesting
it is
because
interesting. I mean, they should have been able to provide me with chapter
yeah,
and verse
yeah,
of a
yeah,
fight going on.
yes,
Somebody's very comfortable.
yes,
Somebody is very comfortable
yes,
if there isn't a
yeah,
document readily available for a citizen who asks, why are you
yeah,
under-resourced and why are you underfunded? Because we are all
yes,
suffering on account of
yeah,
it. And it is their excuse for every delay everywhere. We
yes,
just need the
yes,
resources. If only we had the resources. Well, I'm thinking, where's
yes.
evidence of a fight for the resources?
Yes,
That's not going
yes.
to
No, you
come with
need
a
to
bow on
fight.
it. Yeah.
I use the analogy, Tressa, that when I was head of school and when if I had a new program and it was successful, the director would say, "Oh, that's a successful program, take in more students," because obviously it's more lucrative, they get more capitation and so on, and student fees. But I would sit at that table, Trust, and say, "I'm not leaving the room. Yes, I will take in more students, but I'm not leaving the room till you give me the budget for those students that they'll have a quality experience.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we pack in more students, they have a miserable time, there's low retention." So I said, "Fine, but I will not leave the table till we get that budget to match that number of students coming in." And then they say, "Well, okay, if you don't look for it and you don't fight for it, you won't get it." And I use
Absolutely.
the same analogy for Kildare. If I was elected as a TD, I would be damn sure to say, yes, we're happy to take in more housing, more people from the overspill of Dublin, but I will not leave the table till we absolutely get matched funding that we require and need for people to have a quality experience. So I use the same analogy, and it's quite important that people realize that if you don't look for it and not only look for it, demand it, it won't happen.
Yeah, I suppose my only sadness about that is that
Yeah.
I see people tired of that
Yes.
fight. I
Yes.
mean, I'm
Yes.
knackered with it.
Yes.
I've been
Yeah.
banging that drum myself for quite some time. So it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Am I right in understanding, if I can get a yes or no,
Yes.
if there's absolutely has to be nuance, then fair enough. But if I can get a yes or
Yes.
no, am I right in saying that you would support a pause in development in the highly concentrated, super dense parts of North Kildare? Would you agree with or oppose a pause of additional housing in those tight, choked zones only, so that
Yes.
infrastructure can go in? Would you be?
Yeah, I do think so. I think, Maynooth has been described as a key town and Selbridge has huge population growth. But people are tired of fighting and they're tired of promises.
Mm,
I stand at the door there and people say, "Oh, sure." I think it's sad to me because people think, oh, all politicians are the same because they all promise things. And we've been promised the bridge for years. We've been promised, a pool, and it's never happened. And I genuinely think I was very hopeful when the new chief executive of Kildare County Council took over, Sonia Kavanagh, and she agreed to meet with us in our different political groupings. And the one thing she said to us that she was going to mark her term as chief executive with delivering projects that have been left on the back burner. Now that gave me hope, Trasa,
mhm,
but that's now we're saying, when are we going to get delivered? There is hope there. The Donna Comper lands, the parish hall, and the parish house. there is hope there, and the swimming pool seems to be becoming a reality, as does the second bridge. But until people see that delivered,
Mhm.
and
We can't
exactly,
we can't
yes.
trust it, you know.
Yes, and hope is one thing, but people actually need to tangibly see that there's something actually going to be delivered. I would be very hopeful that those things are going to be, because, as I say, the chief executive has promised that they will be delivered. They're now earmarked with funding. There's now it's with, hopefully on board, Penala will obviously give it the green light. So I'm very much more hopeful. And I think you have to be optimistic about that. But I do think without the infrastructure, it's going to come to a halt. Like, people are just saying, where can we go after this?
Well, I'm glad to understand that you would be like-minded on that point, because there's only so many places you can shove houses and expect everybody to just cope, So
Yeah.
it's nice to hear we're on the same page there. I genuinely, you shouldn't ask a question without knowing the answer, and I didn't know what your answer was going to be on that.
Yeah.
I'll go back to the comments to guide us, because we have a very active audience tonight. Anne Nolan Birchall says, our emergency ambulance cover for Maynooth, Leixlip, Salbridge towns was removed by Bernard Durkin's Fine Gael party, she says, in 2012 as a temporary move. It was never reinstated. Terrible stories have been reported of patients requiring emergency medical services struggling whilst waiting on an outside ambulance cover from Ashbourne in County Meath. What will Angela do to have it reinstated as a priority and a right for our communities?
Yeah, I think it's very important. Yeah, I think that's very important. I was out on the campus actually for the locals, and there was an incident in one of the estates. I was literally out canvassing at one door, and two doors down there was an incident, and there was major panic. And I was there waiting with the neighbours, and that conversation came up exactly. How long will it take for an ambulance to come? Now, thankfully, in that case, the daughter had run to the first responders at the GA, came back with the defibrillator, but it also made me raise the issue about defibrillators in estates. This is a huge development with about 400 houses in it.
Yeah.
And luckily that daughter was quick enough to go and get the defibrillator. So if ever you got the very, very actual evidence that we need more, I mean, we had a growing population and everybody wants to feel healthy and safe. So that would be a priority for me to say to your commentator there, to say that that's obviously people need to feel safe. That's why we need more Gardaí. We need more. We need more, full stop. We need more. We
Yeah.
haven't enough of anything. And I feel, and it's back again to, we have people saying we're one of the richest countries in the world, let alone the OECD, we're one of the richest countries. But people are saying they feel really, really deprived and poor.
Mhm.
And that's wrong. And one of those ways you show people that they feel valued is that you give them a good health service, you give them the basic services. We're not talking about frivolous things like or added on extras. We're talking about education, we're talking about health and your well-being, and all those things feed into, if you're feeling stressed about your child going to school, if you feel stressed about, I had one woman who had to travel to Eden Derry, was the nearest doctor she could get. Now, that woman has since passed. She couldn't drive. She had to wait for her husband to come home from work to bring her to the doctor if she was feeling unwell during the day. Now, I had her on the phone to me saying to me, Angela, are there any new GPs that could take me in Maynooth? Now, that is when you have those real conversations with people, really, it brings home to you how it makes your blood boil, and you say
Mhm.
something has to be done about this. It's not enough to talk. It's not, slogans are easy. We actually need somebody at that table to say this isn't good enough.
Okay. Well, look, we've so much to cover. I have a list of topics here, but I think well, I find it very enjoyable to agree with you so much.
Yeah, well,
So I'm
yeah,
wandering around the conversation.
we've been in that situation, Tressa. You see, both
We
walk
have.
that
Oh, yes,
journey.
we have. That's right. I'll hit another couple of the comments here. There's an edit on Anne Nolan Birchall's comment earlier on. That's okay, Anne. We have the
Yeah,
substance for the correction.
yeah,
Catherine, that is why Catherine says that's why KCC agreed to build the housing, because the more housing, the more funding for KCC, and North Kildare pay the most, but are completely ignored by KCC. That's from Catherine. And moving on, Stephen says, in relation to the services of the ambulances being curtailed, Stephen says the same with the Garda stations. Maynooth and Celbridge have no presence. Celbridge has one of the largest populations in Kildare with no Garda. The bridge gets promised every election. I found an article from Come on, Stephen. I found an article from 1978, he says, with the same promises.
yeah,
I want to talk about making promises, Angela. I want to
yeah,
talk about that
yeah,
because today, by coincidence, of course, I spend my life with my phone in my hand, especially around elections, looking
yeah,
at stuff. And I saw a lovely video of your good self walking down
yeah,
Leixlip Main Street, talking about the dereliction the empty buildings and Main Street regeneration. And I think the
Mm.
strapline was vote Angela Feeney #1 to regenerate Leaslip Main Street or something along those lines.
Yes. Yes.
And it's one of the things that blocked me from really considering politics because I don't know that I could make those promises. And I don't
Yeah.
know that I can actually deliver them. And I know it's a
Yeah.
sales pitch, and then there's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
gets delivered.
Yeah.
Just it feels almost like a personal question, but
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
you how do you promise? How can you promise
Yeah.
when there's so much bureaucracy between you and a solution? Do you know what I'm getting at? And do you mind the question?
It's kind of in my DNA a bit, you know. I mean, I'll give you why it's in my DNA. I suppose when I started in higher education, it was in Tala, right? There hadn't been any college in Tala for people to go to third level, and I remember thinking, this is an amazing project. I wanted to be part of this, so I went to lecture there. But I remember going out to sell programs to some of the schools in that area, and I remember walking into one school, and I was walking down to the gym to kind of sell the idea of going to third level to the students in that school. And as I was walking down to the gym, the teacher said to me, I don't know why you're doing this, Angela. They never go to college. Made my blood boil all the more, determined to go down, tell them about the ladder system. You can come in on whatever point you get. You can do a level 5, go to level 6, right up to level 10. And I'm very determined that if there's something that can be done, and I do believe that here we have a town like Leixlip, if you take that example that you mentioned. I had two sisters who used to work on Main Street in Leixlip. There was actually a factory one end of it. There was a factory in the middle. There were shops. It was a buzzing and vibrant place. And you have to ask yourself, how can we get into a situation where the other day as I did that film, there are 7 consecutive buildings all, it's depressing. It is
Mm.
depressing. And it's sad for the businesses that are trying to thrive there and trying to survive. The promise would be, if you take, for example, that there is a law there that says that you cannot have a vacant dwelling, why aren't we making sure that that is a case that you put hefty fines on those owners, business owners, and say to them, you either sell this on or lease it or let it to somebody who wants to run a vibrant business. Also, is it okay for the same family to have bought, like we had do you remember the Mullen Park thing where I stood up against the vulture funds in Mullen
Yeah,
Park against
yeah.
bulk buying out? Should we allow the same family to buy out all of the businesses on one main street and leave them vacant? Surely there are laws that we can overnight could say that that should not be allowable.
So
That
in
you could say,
in brief,
yeah,
I'm watching the clock.
yes,
You're talking about common
yeah,
sense, fines, enforcement,
yes, yes.
and representation generally.
Yes, yes. And
Okay,
I think
okay.
that's doable. I think there's a will to do that. And straight away, you can turn things around overnight. Um, yeah, I think that's possible. And it's not
So
about, I wouldn't be into making promises that I think I couldn't keep
I know
for
that
the sake of
it's a
promise.
question I've
Yeah,
asked myself in
yeah,
considering it's a dream one
yeah,
day that I would do something,
yeah,
and I think to
yeah,
myself, geez, could I
yeah,
could I
yeah,
promise, because
yeah,
because I'm such a skeptic, I suppose.
yeah,
We'll move on. We'll read you one or two of these. And then I have a final question on Castletown, and we should probably move on
yeah,
from there and wrap up
yeah.
looking at the clock. Lulu says it's not locally specific. That's no problem, Lulu. Neither is running for the Dáil. If
Yeah.
Labour were to be involved in a coalition, what is the party preference? At the leaders' debate on Monday, very little clarity was provided. I agree with Lulu. I did not know what Ivana Bacik was getting at. Do you know? Is it something you can share with us? Because
No, I think the focus, as has been said by Ivana and will be said by me, is that our focus is, growing as many, members of the Dáil because we need to regrow, and we hopefully this will be a positive output for us in this election. And that's been our focus genuinely, is actually getting as many people elected to the Dáil for the Labour Party. And I think after that, when you're discussing programs for government, I think the mistakes that were made in the past, that we didn't have commitment before we went into any program of government of what the important ticket items would be for as a party from a policy point of view. If you have that with any other party, at least that means you've a solid foundation. You're not going in to a situation where we were stung before in the past. And I think we've learned the lesson of the past where we went in. We went in at a very bad time where the country was on its knees, not by Labour brought it to its knees. It was another government party, Fianna Fáil, brought us to the knees, and people forget that. We went in at a very, very difficult time, and we were stung after that. And we are rebuilding, and we are now very strong. We've had a very good local elections. We have an MEP in Europe, and we're hopeful that we'll have a very good or general election. So my hope is that if we are in that discussion, that we're talking to people who are like-minded from a policy point of view, and that we make sure that there's a commitment before we enter into government, that those really important commitments on health and housing and jobs and family issues. Because to me, this election is all about family.
Mhm. So
All the other
you're
came out of it.
so it's fairly it's
Yeah.
broad.
Yes.
You'd let's say, for example, you have a Labour has a very successful election,
Yes.
increases the number of TDs in the Dáil, then they would confer with like-minded parties.
Yes.
And by that I'm thinking left. Am I right in thinking kind of
Yes.
lefty?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Before forming some sort of a unit to go in.
Yeah.
Is that the
Yeah.
understanding,
I
or is
mean,
it?
I've heard discussion about that. We've been in kind of out on the trenches now, kind of in the canvas. So really, the discussion about that will happen later, I'd imagine, Tressa. But I do
Yeah,
think there is discussion around forming an alliance of some sort with like-minded parties, whether it's the SAC Dems and the Greens, and we don't know where that'll go. And I
okay.
think I lived in France where the left was splintered for so many years and had no strength, and then when they did come together, there was. So I would hope
That,
be
that's
hopeful. Yeah,
That's
healthy.
fair enough. So I suppose it's a case of getting on the far side of November
Yes,
29th and the grueling weekend after that,
exactly.
and
Yeah,
then seeing what's what. But I feel like I'm a bit clear on it anyway.
yeah,
There's a question that has come up. I might ask you to address it in the comments afterwards because I'm watching the clock here and I want to get to Castletown before we wrap up. Mick is asking, why are they
yes,
allowed to build a bridge to nowhere to allow a developer to build more houses in Sandwich? I think the point there, Mick, and I've seen other politicians answer this, is that the bridge is a precursor to development because otherwise it would be more houses without a bridge.
exactly.
I don't want to speak for you now, Angela. It's just that I've seen it asked and answered. There's a rake load of comments under this video. It's one of the busiest ones we've had. So if you get a chance or someone on your team has a chance to come in and grab a couple of these questions, if there's time between
Brilliant.
now
Thank
and
you for
then.
that.
Gosh, there's so many of them. Oh, here's Kira. A former councillor, Kira Galvin, says, I hope I'm not too late with my comment. I can't see the live feed on mobile, unfortunately. Don't worry, Kira, it'll be on replay. Angela is a great candidate, and I'm very proud to support her campaign. Anyone who knows her will tell you that she genuinely cares and is in politics to make a difference. She's exactly the kind of TD we need more of. Kind, collaborative, fair, but also firm and well able to stand up for people. On a personal level, oh, it's jumped around. Bear with me. On a personal level, she goes on. As a colleague, Angela was incredibly kind and supportive to me during my time on the council, particularly during my difficult pregnancies. I hope everyone viewing tonight will see how good she is and would be in the Dáil, and I will give you their and will give her their first preference vote. I think there's a little
Oh,
typo
thank you,
there.
Kira.
Isn't
Thank you,
that so
Kira.
sweet?
Oh, that's
So
so,
sweet. Okay, we're going to spend 2 minutes is all we've got left. Two
yes,
minutes on Castletown. I've been banging the Castletown drum all week as well. I'm sure you're aware. What's your view on Castletown, Angela?
yeah,
You're Labour, and there's a
yeah,
SIP2 connection,
yeah,
and there's a staff, advocacy role generally, and I'm sure that you're sensitive to it. But talk to me about your
yeah,
views on. I know you know where I am on it,
yeah,
but
yeah.
just give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm 100% about Castletown being restored to the public as an amenity. That's up front, straight up. I mean, my grandfather Tressa was the carpenter in Castletown, and my
I
father
didn't
grew
know
up.
that. I
Yeah,
didn't know
he
that.
was the carpenter in Castletown Estate.
Oh,
And my father grew up in Selbridge. So when I'm walking down Lime Avenue with my kids, I feel I'm walking on the same space. That's so important to me. I know it sounds cheesy, but I'm walking the ground they walked when they went to work or when they walked there. So that's key to me. But on a very, very important level, I think this needs to be resolved. And I think the council has a role to play, but if it can be CPO, I mean, I was so saddened when I saw that those signs go up the very first day in September when those landowner took over and put poisoned lands up. I mean, that was so depressing to me. I
mhm.
feel at this stage there is a solution to it. The right of way is key. And I think you have found documents and other people have found documents proving that there is a right of way there.
Yeah,
And that's if there's, I always believe in evidence-based and fact. And if the facts are there and are undisputed, we have to, and I'm calling on Kildare County Council. I have sent through the formal CRM system a request that the
saw that. Thank
council
you.
would acknowledge this right of way that has been established, that unfortunately the OPW is not acknowledging. Crazy. I mean, the facts are there, the evidence is there. I have great difficulty with the OPW and I always have had. This is only, to me, exemplifying that to its worst instance. Over the years, I have invited the OPW in to our MD. You can't get a kinder environment to come into. They refuse that. But simple issues like the way the obelisk or the Connolly's Folly is treated, in France or something like that, it would be treated like a wonderful
Mhm.
edifice, or lighting of Maynooth Castle. They don't even respond to my emails on basic issues. I find them disrespectful,
So
and
do
I
I.
find this is another exemplification of, to some extent, an arrogance and a disrespect and disregard. And
Thank you.
here we have an opportunity for them to say, here are the facts, here's the evidence. It's there in black and white. And if that right of way, which to me does exist, we also have to have the council acknowledge that as well. So I called on the council to do that. And if that can be established, then we're back to where we have public access to this amenity and it is restored. And that's the
Absolutely.
end game.
It has to be restored to the people. The OPW should
Yes,
not be locking those gates. God, I've been saying it for over a year now. The OPW have no right to have
absolutely.
precluded people from accessing our land. They have disconnected Leixlip, the Parsonstown side of Leixlip, that entrance down at Ballylangley. They have severed the link between Leixlip and
Yes,
Salvage. Two
yes,
next door neighbours who have
yes,
shared families and shared relationships and shared memories and shared just so much. And locking those
yes,
gates at any time of day is an affront to that entire relationship. And I just think
yes,
it has sliced the community
yes.
between the two towns.
100%.
And
Yeah, 100% agree.
and
Yes,
OPW are claiming that the road in question was on land now owned by KCC, so they should have no difficulty figuring out where it was. Let's come to that in time. And thank you for making the representation
yes,
on it. I did see that going through on the system. And somebody sent me a screenshot that it had gone to. Was it
yes.
yourself? Did you come back to me yourself on it? You
I
did. You
might have
did. I'm
sent it
so
to you
sorry.
myself.
You did. You
And
did. You did.
I'm still awaiting the reply, interesting enough, but as soon as it lands, I'll send it to you as well, and you can
You'll
update
you'll
people
be
on
wait
that.
you'll be waiting on that. There's nothing
Yes.
worse than getting a CRM number from Kildare County Council because
Well, the only
you
thing
know
is
you're
that,
in for a long
yeah,
wait.
they have created a new dashboard and they've updated that CRM system where you can actually track where your CRM is in the system. So at least that. So I'll be able to track that tomorrow and see where it's at, Tressa.
Fair enough. Well, if you want a brief on the evidence, please let me know. I'd be very happy to
Yes.
provide it. So, ladies and gentlemen, what a conversation and such busy comments. And there are plenty more of them that I didn't get to. I'm sorry to anybody who gave us a comment that I didn't get to. Um, this has been a conversation with Councillor Angela Feeney. We've been all over the show. I could have hit the Tetris report and KCC underspending with you, Angela. I could have hit the burst report and the issues with Irish Water. I could have hit the social infrastructure side of things. And I wanted to talk about accessing service for people with disabilities. I wanted to talk about it all, but unfortunately we are gone for time. Um, I really appreciate you giving us so much time, and I know you're campaigning, and you gave us this valuable hour. So thank you. I'm going to hand it back to you for a parting word to everybody, and then I'll wrap us up.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Thanks, Tressa. Thanks very much. And thanks really for the opportunity. And I suppose, if anything, I hope that you've all got a taste or a flavour of the fact that I have a great love for the county and this place. And I'm also going to work hard if I was elected, because and I'm not afraid to stand up and be counted and say things as they are. But most importantly, I'm fighting for families in this election, because I feel a lot of the issues flow out of that, whether it's school places or childcare places, health services, and the basic infrastructure that people should have as a right, not as something that they have to fight for. And I feel people are tired of fighting. They want things now because they don't want to wait for their grandchildren to see a swimming pool being in Maynooth or in Selbridge or in North Kildare. They want services and they want them now. So if you want somebody that you can trust, that has integrity and says things as they are, but also is prepared to work really hard on your behalf, I'd ask for your support in the general election. And thanks again, Tressa, and all your listeners.
Thanks so much. Well, there you have it. Angela Feeney is looking for your #1 vote on November 29th. Thanks for being with us, everyone. Really appreciate it. This will be available on podcast within half an hour or an hour, and available on replay within the Salvage Politics group as well. So invite your friends in, and let's let everybody have a look at these interviews. Angela, thank you so much. And Ihuwa, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Tressa.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.